So now that I know that there are two basic modes of operation, exec mode signified with this greater than sign, and this one is not very useful for the most part because it is limited even in the way that we can monitor the device. We don't have a lot of commands available for us. So most of the time we're going to be working in the privilege modes. So in order to get there, I type in enable keyword, or en for short enter, and I am now in the user mode that allows me to do all monitoring on the device. It's called privileged mode or enabled mode. Now, in this mode of operation, we can only monitor. There's very, very few things that can be configured, like maybe terminal lines. I can display how many lines will be displayed at any given time. I can configure that. Or I can do few other things, but the real power of the configuration lies in the global configuration mode or modes of operation configuration mode of other components of a device. So let's start with our journey with the basic configuration. I would like to enter this global config mode. The way I do this is a configure terminal command. Now this command obviously can be once I hit enter, it'll take me there. That command allows me to enter the global configuration mode, which means that whatever I configure here, now this is very important to remember, we're going to be now changing configuration operation of a device in this mode, but that global config mode only applies on the device as a whole thing. So for example, one of the things I can set up here is the host name. So host name is the keyword, and again I can use question mark, and I can display what is possible here in this mode, and there's so much more commands available. I'm scrolling now using spacebar. And what I want to do initially, I want to show you how to configure the host name of a device. We don't want to have dozens switches with each one of them named switch or router, right? We want to say host name. By the way, if I do question mark and I scroll down to letter H, it's alphabetically displayed here. So I see the host name here, which means you can set, with this command, you can set system's network name. So let's just press quit, maybe reset my terminal, enter in host name, space question mark. What follows is word. So now it expects the actual word. Look at the uppercase. That means it's not a command. It actually expects you to provide a word, like my switch. So once I hit space question mark, it says there are no other options available, but there is a carriage return, means enter. So once I hit enter, it'll change the mode of operation. So this command is executed in the RAM memory, and it's going to take effect immediately. If I hit enter, I can see that. Now, how do I take the command out? I changed my mind. I don't want this switch to be called my switch. I can do this in two ways. I can say no host name. So most of the commands can be taken back with the same command preceded with a no keyword. In this particular, I can say no host name, hit enter, and it'll do just the trick. If I do this one more time, I can say no host name my switch, and it'll bring this back to default as well. So sometimes you have to add this extra parameter, sometimes you don't. And only the experience tells you when. So if I don't want this to be switched, I want to call this just like my tab says SW1. So I will say host name, and again I can abbreviate that, either host, press tab, or just say host if it's enough letters, and SW1. It'll take my command if there is enough letters in the command to uniquely identify the command in a context. Bang, it's switched. Now this configuration is already taking effect, so there's no questions. Are you sure you want to do this? Really, are you really sure you want to do this? Is as soon as the command is syntactically correct, it's going to be accepted when you hit enter. Clear my terminal and let's play around. How do I step down to the privileged mode or enabled modes? There's two ways of doing that. I can type in exit and hit enter. It'll take me back to my privileged exec mode. And it also sends information that, some configuration was done on a console at this particular point in time. Now, what is important here is also there's another way. So if I go to, let's say, configure terminal, which by the way, I don't have to type the whole thing. I'll say conf space T, it'll do just fine. So I can abbreviate the commands every time. And if I, let's say, go to interface E00, let's say actually interface E00, now I'm in the context. So look how the prompt changed. So first I was in this privileged exec mode, which the hash mark indicates it is the privileged mode. Then we entered the conf t. We were in the global config mode. So in the prompt I see still hash because it's a privileged mode, but now it's a global configuration mode. Once I typed in int e0/0, later on that, why e0/0 later. But now in the prompt I see configuration if. I am in the config of interface. Unfortunately, Cisco iOS does not tell me which interface configuration I entered. I need to know that. If I don't know, I'll just exit out and do it again. By the way, the full command is interface ethernet 0/0, same way. Now, if I type in exit twice, so first exit takes me back to the global config mode, second exit takes me back to the privilege modes, and disable takes me back to the user exec mode. There's a shortcut, and let's go back to privilege mode or enabled mode. Let's go back to configuration, interface E00. I can step down from any mode of operation, any context, back to the privilege mode. Instead of typing exit enter in this particular situation, I can type the keyword end. If I do that, it'll take me back to the privileged exec mode from any mode of operation. Let's go back here. I can also do Control Z or Control Z if you're on the other side of the pond. And that has the same effect as end keyword. And the last two things I want to do here in this particular video clip is, let me reset my terminal, is to show you some shortcuts we can use. First of all, before I do that, actually, let's go show how do I display what I just configured, or what is the actual configuration of a device. If I do show running configuration, it'll display all of the configuration that is default plus the one that is configured. And the one I configured was a host name. So obviously you have to get familiar with the sections. We'll talk more about those later when we do actual configuration. But for now, one note you have to make is this. If my device reboots right now, everything I've done, which is the host name for now, is going to be lost because all this configuration is kept in a RAM memory. In order to preserve that, I need to copy the running configuration into NVRAM, which is this command. This means that I am trying to copy the current running configuration in a RAM memory into a startup configuration, which is kept in NVRAM. NVRAM is non-volatile RAM, which does not disappear upon powering off a device. So if I do that, it'll ask me, do you want to call the destination file name startup config? If I hit enter, this is a default, so this square brackets show the default name. It should be that. I press enter and now it's saved. I can reboot the device and my configuration is not going to be lost. So the last thing I want to see in navigation is some shortcuts. Some commands might be quite lengthy. So for example, if I do exclamation mark is like a comment, so I can put anything here, and there's no error because it's ignored. Anything preceded with a question mark, with a exclamation mark, is ignored. So some commands could be quite long in quite long and will not fit on the screen of my terminal. So terminal by default has a limited number of characters. So if I exceed that limit, on the left hand side I see the $sign. What this means that there's something hidden behind on the left hand side. So if I use my cursor right now, left cursor, if I scroll back up to that point, if I exceed that, now it tells me that something is hidden behind this $sign on the right hand side. Now, so I can do a right click, again, right arrow, and scroll between those. What is useful is Control A. Control A takes me to the beginning of a line, and Control E takes me to the end of the line. I can also do some magic with Control. Let's go Control K. If I do Control K, it erases everything to the right of the cursor. If I do Control U, it'll erase everything to the left of the cursor. So those are very important shortcuts to remember because they will allow faster navigation in Cisco iOS. The last basic navigation in iOS is about recalling previous commands. So if I type in, say I'm going to go to enabled mode or privileged exec mode, enable, and if I do, let's say, show clock, and I'll do show IP interface brief command, so that's second command I'm typing in, and I do Q for quit, and I'll do maybe show running config, and I'll do Q for quit, I can do now show history. So this shows me the history of commands I typed in. Obviously, it remembers all the commands I typed in from the very beginning, so I see the last 3 commands was my show history, the last commands. The second to the last was show running config, and show IP interface brief, and so on and so forth. I can invoke those commands, I can see what those were, but I can also invoke those commands by using Control P for previous commands. We'll go Control P one more time. It scrolls back up in the history. Control P should be now show IP interface brief and show clock, or Control N, next command in the list. Control N. Also, what can be done is the same thing with the upper or lower arrow. So if I go up arrow, and the down arrow goes down the list. So those are very important things to remember, because sometimes we can do something quickly and we remember that, oh, the command was done a few clicks ago. Why don't we just, use upper or lower arrow to invoke those commands?